Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Second Nature, a show all about living with ecological grief and loss. I am truly excited about our guest today. She's a phenomenal woman, award winning film director, writer, editor, producer, visionary, sound designer, all wrapped up in one really wonderful human being. So I'd like to welcome Jennifer Abbott, who is a Sundance and Genie award winning film director who really specializes in films and documentaries about social justice and environmentalism, and in particular and lately of the impacts of the global climate crisis and different environmental shifts, all on the more than human worlds and also on ourselves and what it means for loss, both personal and planetary, and what it means for ecological grief. So Jennifer was born in Montreal and studied political science, but with a particular interest in radical political thought, women's studies, and deep ecology at McGill University, which you can really see as themes in her films. She attended Emily Carr University for Art and Design, but then after a few years left and taught herself everything she needed to know to become not just a filmmaker, but a truly award-winning and internationally renowned filmmaker. In 2020, and this is how I met Jennifer in person, she released the multi-award winning feature documentary, The Magnitude of All Things, which is just a stunningly beautiful portrayal of the emotional and psychological dimensions of the climate crisis and of really that connection between the personal and the planetary. She's featured in that film stories from all over the world, including Nunavut in northern Canada, where I've worked, the Amazon rainforest, the Great Barrier Reef, and the fires of New South Wales, among many other places. Now, that same year, because releasing one award-winning film isn't enough, Jennifer also released The New Corporation, the unfortunately necessary sequel, which was the follow-up to her hit film, The Corporation, which I was a huge fan of. And so when I first got Jennifer's email in my inbox, I thought, no, this can't be the same Jennifer Abbott. And in addition to all of the wonderful things she does, Jennifer is also a mother of 3 children, including twin daughters who were born in 2006 and who you'll see featured in The Magnitude of All Things. She's a wonderful and early adopter of renewable energy and transport and lifestyle, an organic farmer, and a practitioner of Zen Buddhism. And she splits her time between Vancouver and the Gulf Islands on the west coast of Canada. But in addition to all that, Jennifer is just a warm and lovely and open-hearted human who approaches the world with such an interesting and unique gaze in a way that has captured me from getting to know you over the years, Jennifer. And I'm so excited to have this conversation because the way that you think about our connections to the more than human, the work that you do, and how you tell the stories has been so impactful to me, and I know to thousands and thousands of others. So welcome to Second Nature.
Oh, thank you so much, Ashley, for that really wonderful introduction. And the admiration absolutely goes both ways. I am in awe of you and your work and deeply respectful of all you do in this world.
So Jennifer, I want to dive right in and go right into the ecological grief and loss and the emotions that we feel connected to the more than humans. And how did you start? What was your moment where you started to have these the both the emotions and the realization of what you were experiencing?
Yeah, it really is, as I describe it in the opening of The Magnitude of All Things. I was in my garden on Salt Spring Island, and there was, the flame painted sky from a nearby fire that I knew was climate change related. And there was like tiny specks
Mm.
falling from the sky, and I looked up and I literally thought it was snowing. It was July. And then I realized it was ash, from this forest fire. And my sister, Sally, had passed away a few years earlier. And it truly was this sort of, this moment of, what, yeah, what am I feeling? This is grief. I know this feeling. It's similar in tenor, but different in intensity to the feelings of grief that I had and still had when I lost my sister. And so that was really the first time that I put this emotion, which we culturally and dominant culture reserve for other humans. So I really recognized in that moment that I was feeling this deep, deep grief and sorrow for the changing world around me. So
Hmm.
that was about 10 years ago or so that
Hmm.
I first put those things together.
Yeah, the way that you start, the magnitude of all things, and I really can't recommend this film enough if you're at all interested in that, the personal and the planetary, the ecological grief and loss. It is such a beautiful meditation and global story over what so many of us are experiencing all over the world, and the way that you start to tell that story. I think for me, when you reached out the first time with the film and you had sent a short little clip, and when I opened it up, there was an IV dripping, and then you transpose it into sea ice drifting. And I was so viscerally, it stopped me in my tracks. I was so viscerally impacted by what you had done there and by the juxtaposition and by this idea that our personal losses and the suffering of the human body and the suffering of the more than human, you brought together in this most beautiful and profound way. And I'm wondering if you can talk about that journey of when you had that moment and that realization, and then what led you into this now sort of over a decade pursuit through film and through art to tell these stories.
Well, as is usually the case, I might have an idea for a film without thinking it entirely through. So, in that moment, I was actually in the process of developing another film that was climate change related. But, when I had that realization in my garden, I went, there's this huge component of climate catastrophe
Mhm.
that has not yet infiltrated our public discourse. And that is the emotional and the psychological component. Because, to come to term, I mean, I know I don't, this is your field of expertise, but this was my thought process, to come to terms with the scale and violence of what we need to come to terms with. It's just overwhelming. And, I have, I don't know anyone that has an easy time with it. So I really recognized at the time that this was nowhere in the public discourse that I had found. Of course, there were small pockets. And that was reflected when I had the idea for the film and I talked to people about it and actually, used the words like ecological grief. And, but very few people knew even what it was. And now, of course, you know better than I that it's quite ubiquitous. So, so I set out at that moment then to make a film about the psychological and emotional dimensions of the climate crisis. And it all came very quickly, and I knew I wanted to tell two parallel narratives
Mm.
because my sister had passed away in 2008, but she was a remarkable woman and had done so much deep work. And, the way that she moved through the world, I had so much respect for, and the way that she navigated her illness and, on the one hand, surrendering to what was, on the other hand, wanting to live, walking that line, doing everything she could to live, but really sort of coming to terms with what was, coming
Mm.
to terms with her mortality, coming to terms with impermanence. And so it just seemed to me there were so many lessons that I learned from her that were applicable to this moment in time as we collectively reckon with the climate crisis, including, coming to terms with the changing world around us, the sorrow, the grief we feel. It's the end of the world as we knew it. I'm not
Mhm.
saying it's the end of the world, but it is the end of the world as we knew it. And so, that transition to this new world is going to be a very difficult one. And so, I just felt the two narratives had this overlap. And not only, my sister actually wrote a lot of letters before she died.
Mm.
And she actually asked me to do something with her letters. And I'm sure she thought it was a book of like maybe a small book or something like that, right? And I don't think she would have ever have anticipated exactly what I did do to them. But I was very happy to be able to, I think, honor her memory in this way.
Yeah, I mean, it is such a stunningly beautiful love letter to your sister and to the planet all at the same time. And it was the first time where I saw someone do that to make that link. And I know sort of in the academic and research spheres, it was still relatively new, 10 years ago, and people were just trying to grapple with it and get it understood and find that language. But the connection, it was still really separate from personal grief for another human and another human body. And so you bridge those areas in the most beautifully poignant, emotional way. And I think that it actually gave so many people the emotional pathway to get from one type of grief that we're familiar with to another type of grief that people were maybe intuitively or unconsciously or subconsciously feeling. And you walk them through the pathway to have both, that both can be true and that both exist, and that this new transition to a new way is actually something that the grief work will need to be that constant companion. And it's such a powerful thing. And I know when I talk to people who have seen it, that's one of the things I draw out is like that connection that you made and that you drew and that you lived through the film yourself by weaving your sister and the story that you have with her and the beautiful relationship. And then your girls acting out the relationship that you both had. I mean, it's just, there's so many layers to it that I think gave people the emotional language and space to understand something that was just really starting to hit the global zeitgeist of what's actually one of the outcomes of the climate crisis.
Oh, I'm very grateful to hear that that's a lot of how I have similar feedback. And I think one way I sort of looked at it was, what does it take to look towards as opposed to look away from the climate crisis, right? And I think that ultimately that's what I was, when you talk about a pathway, I was in many ways trying to provide viewers, recognizing that, there's no typical viewer, and in terms of this trajectory of coming to terms with the crisis, there's going to be a huge range, and I just really want to deeply respect and acknowledge those that are really far on the path. But everyone, is on the path, including, I don't know how you feel, but I feel myself, I am very much on the path, like, even having been walking it for over a
Mhm.
decade. Like, it's just it's probably going to be a lifelong thing. So anyway, that's very gratifying to hear that you've been getting that feedback. So thank you.
Yeah, I definitely feel it's a lifelong goal, and there's so many days where I feel like I'm not doing the good work for it. That I'm avoiding it or suppressing or choosing to think about it but not feel it. And I think that that's the enormity, the magnitude, as you put in your film, is so profound, and it is so existentially altering when you let it in. And I remember the first time I watched Magnitude, um, like the sort of gut-wrenching weeping through the whole thing, because it was like this catharsis to see, the way that you weave the story and told the different pieces, but also to see, the people that I cared about so much being reflected in the film and telling their stories, and then people all over the world sharing together, and just the profound nature of knowing that it wasn't just in Labrador, or it wasn't just me or our team, or it wasn't just people I knew. It was this kind of truly collective thing. And there was something so profound and difficult, but also freeing and unifying. Like I felt comfort in the grief. And did you experience that making it as you were going? Because you must have heard hundreds of hours of profound sadness. And I just wonder that what journey was it for you as you were churning and hearing and then editing and telling, and just so many years of your life went into this?
Yeah, I remember earlier when I said that I didn't really think through when I had an idea. That happens often. And, I it's really hard to say. I think ultimately for me, making the film was cathartic.
Mm.
And partially also, my twin daughters were very young when my sister passed away. So I didn't really have a full, full sort of experience in grieving my sister either. So, ultimately it was cathartic to let go, to deeply reflect, to also honor
Hmm.
the earth. I really tried to do that. I
Mhm.
really I wanted to reflect the more than human world in just the awe-inspiring beauty, and I wanted, to bow down in front of the earth, really, who also in the film has a voice that's part of the sound design. So I think that also was cathartic for me, just to sort of revere in this film my deep love, of my sister, but of the planet that we're entangled within. So, I'm not, but it was hard. There's no question. It was also hard. But that's just, I'm much happier doing something hard that feels real and powerful and honest than yeah, I'm pretty unhappy and dwelling on the superficial, especially in a time of crises. So overall, yeah, I think I feel very grateful for the experience and grateful for the opportunity to have made that film.
So you traveled all over the world to tell this story and met some really incredible people. And I'm wondering if you could share sort of some of the different highlights that really moved you and that has stayed with you along the way.
Oh, it's so hard because we also have limited time, of course. I would say, I mean, I could talk about everyone, including my time in Rigolet with you and meeting community members there, who were just I so appreciated people's willingness to be vulnerable and open. And I think, let me just say something sort of universal before I go into some particulars. And this is something I think in retrospect kind of surprises me. Is like the joy I found,
Mm.
the spirit, the in that with the Sapara in the Amazon. I don't think I've ever been around a community that's laughing so much, right? And even though, the situation for them is quite dire, um, this is what I'm really finding, is that I think that people who are willing to go towards these things, go towards the difficult,
Mm.
is a tremendous relief in letting down the defenses that are pushing it all away. I mean, obviously, I can't say that's a very general statement, but it's sort of my own experience, and so generally, I'll say as I've traveled around the world, I've noted the joy in all these communities. One, I'd love to talk about Auntie Pat and Uncle Kevin. They were the Wanarua traditional land custodians in New South Wales, fighting open pit coal mining. I was really determined to have an Indigenous voice discussing the situation there. And, it took a long time to track them down. And, anyway, and they were very, very cautious of us, of course, understandably, when we first arrived. Um, and by the end, Uncle Gavin gave me a huge bear hug that I'll never forget. But I just I felt really like giving them a platform and a voice was so important, because they're so disenfranchised.
Mhm.
So they are two that definitely stand out. Being in the on Sapara territory with different activists there whose literally our lives are at
Mhm.
risk in what they're doing, the courage they have, what that again was quite something. I mean, there were moments, of course, of danger,
Um,
there was a plane crash in the Amazon that we witnessed, and so nobody died, but people were really hurt.
mm.
So, there was just it was very exciting, and it was very I just felt so honored to go into all of these places and spend time, and so, I so appreciative of you, Ashley, for facilitating our going to Rigolet and your being there, that I think we got immediate sort of, okay, these people are okay because you have such a deep and close relationship. So, that also stood out. And the
Mm.
people, Derek and Sarah, really just wonderful people. So, as I say, I'm kind of rambling because I could just go on and on and on, really about every single, meeting Greta Thunberg and the climate strike. That was quite memorable. People talked at the time about, she talks very openly of having autism. And, what I had read was, certain things about what kind of a personality she was. I didn't, she didn't in any way meet how people described her. I just have very rarely met somebody who had such a sense of purpose
Hmm.
and was so firm in her belief system, in this. The only like, I know that Anna Maria Tremonti talked about meeting, Malala and feeling the same way, and I think those 2 women are probably got a lot in common. So, anyway, I there's so many people and so many stories, and really it was intense because we went to 4 continents in, I think, 4 months or something like that, but it was intense.
Yeah, and for very different ecosystems and environments, and
Oh my
going
gosh.
from the snow and ice to down to the Amazon, and so
Well, we were in New South Wales in Australia, and it was literally +40, and there was monsoons, like, literally,
Mm.
with cars going down the street, floating, not going, floating down the street that were flooded to, to up north, right? Where it was like we were -35 or even more,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Yeah, that's, yeah, that
yeah,
alone, even just the technical ability to be able to film and do the sound and all over the world and the conditions you were in is quite amazing. But I love how you describe the people who are at the front lines and who are doing the grief work also bring the joy. And that is something, well, I think your film shows that because even though there's so many points of devastation, you can see the joy and the resilience and the idea that people are not going to give up, that they are going to keep working for a better future that treats them more than humans, that treats the earth, that treats the planet better. And I think that's something that I have always, well, learned a tremendous amount from my own work, but really held on to too, was that if you face the grief, if you go through the challenges and people are still going, there is this joy and this openness because it's the other side of the pain and the grief is this love and this hope and this joy. And that has been so profound to see people who have that capacity and that it gives me something to strive for to have that capacity is that I can experience both. And I think your film demonstrates that this even when people were discussing incredibly hard things, suddenly there are these points of humor and points of brilliance and points of wisdom and points of laughter. And I think you just kind of showed the wholeness that is grief, and I think it's such a gift to the cinematic world, but also how then people are able to think about their own grief as not so isolating anymore, that it's this kind of collective experience, and it's yeah, it is such a beautiful work. I really can't talk about it enough, and I don't know how you would have picked. I love all the stories. I don't think I could pick any part of the film or, they all struck me differently, and they all tell you something. They expose a different dimension of this planetary loss that we're all facing.
yeah. If you're in Canada, it's actually very easy to see. So it's on Knowledge Network and it's on CBC Gem, it's on Amazon Prime, and it's on Apple TV. And it is also on the National Film Board of Canada website. So very easy to see in Canada. And if you're not in Canada internationally, I'm happy to point people in the right direction. Different, there's different streaming and stuff like that there.
Yeah, it's definitely worth the watch and watching it multiple times because you pick up different things each viewing, and I think sometimes too, depending on where you are in your own journey, it speaks to you differently each time because you hear the stories differently. So I know that this is a journey for you as well, and I'm wondering if you are willing to share kind of some of the things that you do to take care of yourself and how you process your own ecological grief and the loss that we're all experiencing.
Well, I mean, I do think, as I said earlier, that the work I do in a counterintuitive way helps a lot. And that sort of probably is because of this idea I have, not mine originally, but of hope being hope being action, hope being a practice. So the work I do enables me to take action that gives me hope. So I think that's foundationally. So for example, I mentioned I have a to you in another correspondence a new film called When Rain Becomes Fire,
Mm.
which is going to be, it's at its very early stages, about war and the more than human world. So the profound impacts of war on other species, lands, sea, atmosphere, and the climate. And I had that idea only about 6 weeks ago or so. And as soon as I had it, and it just came to me, and I felt such relief because of all of the extreme global conflicts right now. I've just been feeling so distraught
Mm.
because of the war and the conflicts themselves, but also because of what it means for our tackling climate catastrophe and what it means, obviously, for the suffering of the people there, but also the non-humans there,
Mm.
et cetera, et cetera. So I was so distraught, but then once I had the idea, I mean, I'm still distraught and despairing, but I was able to put some of that energy into this new film, which I'm really excited about. So my work is very foundational, I think, to my sort of being able to be in this world that's breaking my heart.
Mm.
And then I also like I go out into the forest every day with my two rescue dogs, and I run, and I do what's called I call tree yoga. I started doing yoga during COVID, and now I'll never go back into a studio. And I go into the back trails, and I have stations, and I use trees as props. And if you ever see someone in a with red running shoes doing a headstand in the middle of Pacific Spirit, it's probably me. So I do that. Pretty well. Just being in the forest, and with my dogs, and just like really, and I do different breath work and things, and then I have my Zen practice too.
Mm.
So I have, I'll be a lifelong Zen student. I did take my precepts about a year and a half ago, but I think the practice of Zen, sitting Zazen, what most would call probably the meditation, is really learning how to be
Mm.
with, whatever comes up and letting it go and knowing that we are more than our mind. We are, and that we live in this place of impermanence, and also that the way the culture presents the world is not actually objective reality. And that if we can see the world in other ways that I think for me give me a bigger frame, because as you were speaking of grief, like when you're a collective grief is a much easier thing to bear than a solitary grief. And similarly, what my Zen practice does, like I do practice with other people, but I do a lot alone too, but it sort of places me within a larger frame of
Mm.
being, which takes me out of my ego and at best, not always, and self, and enables me sort of just to feel held by the world, as
Mm.
opposed to that I'm holding the world up, right? And so my Zen practice is another, and I love ideas and reading, and of course, my son's moved out, but my twin daughters live with me, and they're just graduating from high school, and
Mm.
they're quite fierce, and I love that. And they have really, you know, their objectives for their lives are pretty inspirational for me. So of course,
Mm.
supporting them in their passions and dreams
Mm.
is another thing. But it's not an easy time to navigate these things, as you
Yeah.
very well know. Yeah.
Yeah. And so many of, I think, our coping strategies are very similar. And it's the same thing where I find I go outside as much as possible because even though I can simultaneously feel the grief of the changes I'm seeing, being able to touch and kind of commune with something that is beyond human, that is beyond me, that was here before me and will be here after me. And, having that sort of the stillness that you get from the trees and the rocks and the sort of old ones that are out there well beyond us. And also the meditative practice and looking at ways to understand. I love how you said that you feel held by the world instead of holding up. And I think that's something that so many people, including myself, when you care about these issues, you just feel the weight of it, especially with everything happening. As you mentioned, it's not just the climate crisis, it is just complete global upheaval and just the incredible loss of human life and human suffering that we're seeing, and the climate crisis and all of these other things. And so
Mhm.
how do you not get sort of crushed by it? And so I find that sitting and trying to tap into those larger things just so helpful. Even when I feel helpless, I feel that it's helpful. And I know so many people reach out and say that exact thing. How do you cope? And I try to find the awe too. And that's what I love about going outside, is that there's always something to feel awe about, no matter how despairing it is. Like if you look, it is there. And I take my dog out too, and often she's the one that finds it first, because they're just so joyous in the moment. And so she'll find the cool thing. So no matter what sort of mood I'm in or space, she'll direct my attention to something I should look at or something. And it's such a gift to have those beings in your life that point out those things you may have missed, because humans spend so much time, at least I do, up in my head, analyzing and thinking, and sometimes forgetting to really center and live and feel. I'm
Yep.
Yeah. That's Yeah, so she is one of my greatest teachers, actually. And whenever I tell people that, so like, she's a dog. I'm like, yes, but she lives in the moment and she lives with joy and she is grounded and she knows when to rest and she knows when to play, and she know like they're quite something if you pay attention to not just dogs, but the more than human. They show you these things if we're open to it. And,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. And I think you say that so well in Magnitude. One of my favorite scenes is when you're speaking over the whales and you
Hmm.
speak about the more than human world that we think is waiting, that they're kind of waiting for us.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think if we look at science and different studies on the non-human animals, like what I'm finding, like all of them are saying how much more they are than the way that they have been, I didn't, for want of a better word, classified or described before,
Mm.
and so I think humans have a lot to learn generally, not only from our dogs, but I agree, from our dogs too. One of the things I admire, like she, no matter if I'm gone for like 2 minutes, when I get back, she's just like so happy to see me, right? It's like the world is just anew constantly, and there's no sort of ennui or boredom,
Yeah.
it's yeah, yeah. So
Yeah, and I do think, I mean, there's so many teachings from indigenous peoples for thousands of years around this beyond human, more than human wisdom, and that connection that so many of us have lost over so many generations, and particularly with colonial processes and this idea that there's this vast other world waiting for us to discover it, and waiting for us to open up, and waiting for us to learn. And you mentioned being brokenhearted and open-hearted, they're waiting for us through the pain to find ways back to them, and ways back to that knowing. And even the plants, and Robin Wall Kimmerer in Braiding Sweetgrass talks about this so brilliantly, that there's this whole plant world and all of these plant kin just waiting for us. And if only we can get there, if only we can open, if only we can connect. we might
Yeah.
then be able to view the world differently, which compels different actions, and compels different political structures and ethical structures and social structures.
Absolutely. And even as you reference it, like I'm struck and I have this problem myself, like with the binary nature of the English language, because we're already part of them, right? It's just we don't see it that way,
Yeah.
the dominant culture, right? And we're already entangled. And it's not a us them at all. It's more that that's the only way we have to describe it in the English language. So I'm constantly getting tripped up. But, we're already entangled. We're, as you will, it's like we are, and we need to wake up to that fact,
Yeah.
right? And so even shifting our language in that direction, I think is helping.
And putting our energy towards connection or reconnection rather than this constant disconnection. And it's so fascinating to me that sort of so much of Western society has focused so much energy on separation rather than
Yeah.
connection. And you sort of
Yeah.
think, well, what would have happened if the energy was switched to separation, or not to separation, to that connection? We would be in a very different place and a very different time. But
Yes.
somehow, we've gotten ourselves to this place. And so that, Joanna Macy talks about the work to reconnect. And I think that's sort of one of the more important things that we need to do if we're going to have grief as this constant companion now under the climate crisis and under global conflict and all of the other things that are happening and will continue to happen, is that the instinct for so many people is to disconnect, but really the true work we need to do is to connect and feel and face it and walk towards it, and then realize we're not alone and realize
Yeah.
there's this collective power to grief and to mourning.
Absolutely. And as you say those things, I'm struck by how reconnecting is linked to power,
Mm.
because how does, and I know that you referenced Judith Butler that speaks about this a lot, but how do some people benefit from the hierarchies that we culturally have created, that creates the separation, that focuses on the separation, whether it's women, men, or uh, white, black, or whatever it might be, the binary categories, and who profits from these. Because it's not just that one person's on one side and one's on the other. There's a hierarchy, right? And so who profits? So, it's like the intermingling of power dynamics, and with deconstructing separation and leading to and enabling and facilitating connection, it requires like these really substantial political and social change around, transformative power dynamics.
Hmm.
So these things are, I mean, that's one of the things I remember appreciating so much talking to you about the political element within ecological grief, and what's necessary in terms of looking at, who is a mournable body,
Yeah.
which also links to what we're talking about here. So it's fairly really interesting. Like it's just this whole new field. Like I'm so interested actually to learn more about where you are these days in terms of where you're taking your research and your focus. But you're the
No, but
interviewer. We can go there or not. It depends, whatever you want.
well, I think
Obviously.
I'm taking it, part of it is why we're doing Second Nature, is to have these conversations, because there's so much out there and there's so much in the media, but I'm finding that it's kind of replicating the same things because media articles don't have the chance to go really in depth. And so you either have the media that's saying similar things, or you have academic articles that aren't accessible to most people. And what people are really looking for are the conversations with the people who are experiencing it, thinking about it, living with it, churning with it. And so really realizing the importance of having the conversations and then sharing the conversations, because we need to keep thinking about it and keep moving it and keep challenging it. Because you don't want the idea of ecological grief to stagnate or to be co-opted. Or one of my major concerns is it's becoming a very white middle class kind of movement and
Mm,
theme. And so that's, how do we keep the discussions going and keep expanding it and keep challenging it, and also keep it
mhm.
accountable to make sure that it is doing those things to deconstruct power and privilege and to reconnect, because that's really kind of the heart and the purpose and the promise of it, but it can be used in so many different ways. And so having these conversations with people such as yourself who have thought and felt so deeply and have lived it so deeply becomes what I think is important to share with people around the world and have people from around the world join in conversation around it. So that's why having this discussion with you today is such a treat and such an honor. And I learn so much. And it challenges me. It challenges me to live more in the grief. It is that accountability for me too to say, yes, I need to keep doing this grief work. It's hard and it's messy and I don't always want to do it, but I need to, and that it is actually our profound duty and responsibility to the more than humans. And yeah, so thank you for being a part of this. And just
Oh,
before
thank
we
you.
wrap up, I also wonder if you can just share with everyone about the VR project that you're working on too, because I think that's a really beautiful immersive opportunity for people as well.
Yeah, I'm working on a virtual reality piece called The Forest That Breeds Us.
Mm.
Um, Suzanne Simard is sort of involved just in terms of giving some reading through and sort of giving some scientific inputs. And it is most foundational to the project is this concept of umwelt,
Mm.
which is the unique sensory experience of every being. So, as humans, we think often that the way we experience the world is just the way the world is. But of course, it's actually biology interacting with physics and how our unique biology interacts with the physics of the world. And the way that owls do that is very different. The way that a tree does that is very different. The way that a bioluminescent bioflagellate does that is very different. And so basically, the virtual reality piece attempts to take people out of their human embodiment, the way that we perceive and interact with the world, and transport them into the embodiment of 8 different but deeply entangled beings of the Pacific Northwest forest. So I don't know if that was clear, but I think it's going to be quite a. I hope I really want people to feel like it's a healing and a
Mhm.
beautiful transformative experience. And I culminate and end in the bioluminescent bioflagellate
Mm.
because I was up with the Monteguila people doing research for the project. They also have contributed some ideas, and we experienced just the most extraordinary bioluminescence. There's not usually bioluminescence when it rains, but it started raining, and every single little drop that landed on the ocean just exploded in light. And I
Oh,
was sitting there on the dock looking at this, and actually we went swimming, and oh my gosh, I was just like, wow, even somebody that's as disillusioned as I am tonight believes in magic.
yeah.
So the whole VR experience will end as if you are a bioluminescent little tiny sea creature. So anyway, that's what that is all about.
Oh, I am so excited for your new project. I love all your projects, and I think all of them are gonna be great, but the immersive experience to get us out of the human, I am really excited to experience, and I think it will be profound and beautiful, but challenge oneself of where are the boundaries, where really we think we're these discrete little beings, but really our boundaries are so porous, and, yeah, I'm really excited
Yeah.
to experience that
Yeah,
one.
we're all multi-species assemblies, as James Bridle would say, right? Yeah. And
Yeah.
actually, I know we have to wrap up, but I'll say that that piece, it's a work of speculative imagination because, of course, I don't know what it's like being in any other body other than a human body, right? But
Mhm.
we draw on all kinds of, complexity science and indigenous cosmologies, et cetera, to speculate. So,
Yeah. Well, and
yeah.
if we don't speculate and we don't imagine, we don't grow and we don't move. So thank you for everything that you have added to the world with your beautiful films, the way you think, the care, the passion, the true love letters that you have written to the planet and that you've shared. So I highly recommend everyone watch The Magnitude of All Things, but certainly track down all of Jennifer's great works. The Corporation for me was a very profound film as well on a very different topic, but incredibly interrelated to how we ended up with the climate crisis that we're facing today. But Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us on Second Nature and for being so generous with your time and your thoughts and everything that you're sharing with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor and privilege. So thank
And
you.
I always love to end with a wonderful quote from Francis Weller from The Wild Edge of Sorrow, where he says it takes outrageous courage to face outrageous loss. So courage, my friends, and until next time, take good care. This was Second Nature, Living with Ecological Grief. Thank you for joining us today for another powerful conversation about environmental love and loss. And of course, the conversation continues. So please make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and visit ashleeconsolo.ca for more information. Until next time, thanks for tuning in, and take good care.